On my birthday, my daughter, Jessica, bluntly told me that if I were to vanish, nobody would even notice my absence. The worst part was that everyone else simply laughed and agreed, acting as if I were nothing more than a walking bank account. I stood there with the birthday cake knife still in my hand, staring at the 62 candles flickering mockingly before me. The dining room fell silent for only a few seconds before my friend Greg burst into laughter. He told me my daughter was right, and that men were only valued for the money they provided. Mary clapped her hands in agreement, saying that as long as the money kept coming, nothing else mattered. My wife, Linda, seemed uneasy but didn't come to my defense. Instead, she offered a strained smile and told Jessica not to talk like that. Linda then added that stability was the most important thing for a family. Suddenly, the birthday cake looked disgusting to me. The yellow frosting roses that Linda had so carefully created seemed to be mocking me. After 20 years of having birthday cakes and trying to make these moments count, I couldn't help but wonder aloud if that was all I was worth to them. Jessica didn't even bother to look up from her phone. Her thumbs were moving quickly as she was clearly posting something, likely a selfie with the cake. She seemed more interested in what was happening with strangers online than with me on my birthday. She simply told me not to be so dramatic, saying that my purpose was to work, pay bills, and provide for everyone. As the laughter at the table grew louder, Greg slapped his knee and Mary wiped tears from her eyes. Even Linda quietly laughed as she continued slicing the cake. The sound of their laughter echoed around the walls of the house I had been paying for since before Jessica was even born. I carefully put down the knife, my hands surprisingly steady. I murmured an excuse and walked through the kitchen and out the back door. The cool March air felt like a slap to the face, but it was a welcome change from the suffocating atmosphere inside. No one seemed to notice my departure. From behind me, I could still hear their voices, the party continuing as if my absence made no difference. My backyard stretched out into the darkness, with the security light casting long shadows across the lawn I had mowed every weekend for 15 years. The house looked so warm and inviting from the outside, with yellow lights spilling onto the patio where I stood. I knew my family was still celebrating without me. I heard Jessica's laughter coming through the sliding glass door. She was probably showing Greg and Mary something on her phone that was infinitely more interesting than acknowledging my existence. I wondered when she had started to see me as just a walking bank account. The birthday decorations Linda had hung earlier fluttered in the breeze. The streamers and balloons were for a celebration for a man who apparently wouldn't be missed if he disappeared. I touched my shirt pocket, feeling the weight of my wallet, the credit cards, and the cash that seemed to be my entire value to them. I had spent 37 years at the same engineering firm, working through early mornings and late nights. I had missed ball games and put my own dreams on hold so they could live a comfortable life in this house, drive reliable cars, and never have to worry about money. Was this my reward? I watched through the window as Linda served cake to her relatives, seeming more lively than she usually was with me. I couldn't help but wonder when our conversations had become nothing more than discussions about logistics. When had I become just another household expense to be managed? The cold was seeping through my shirt, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside just yet. I needed a few minutes for this realization to fully sink in. In my own home, I was invisible, valued only for what I provided, not for who I was as a person. This truth should have completely crushed me, but instead, something cold and calculating was starting to take shape within me. It was a feeling born from the shattered remains of my illusions about family love and loyalty. The next morning, I made coffee for Jessica. My hands were moving automatically through the routine while my mind replayed every detail of the previous night's humiliation. The dark circles under my eyes, evidence of hours spent staring at the ceiling, were reflected in the kitchen window. Jessica appeared around 9 in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. She was already reaching for her phone before she was fully out of bed. I held out a steaming mug of coffee, hoping for some sort of acknowledgement, an apology, anything that might help close the distance that had grown between us. I asked her if we could talk about what had happened yesterday. She took the coffee without looking at me, her eyes fixated on her phone screen. As she scrolled through social media, she thanked me for the coffee. I tried to tell her that what she had said at dinner really hurt, but she just told me it was a joke and asked me why I was being so serious. She still wouldn't look at me, her thumbs still dancing endlessly across the screen. I tried to explain that it didn't feel like a joke, especially with everyone laughing. She finally looked up, but only to roll her eyes. She told me that maybe it was because it was true, and that dads just work and pay bills. The casual cruelty in her voice was worse than her calculated attack the night before. I realized that she wasn't being malicious. This was just her honest perception of my role in her life. I was a function, not a person. I asked her if that was truly all she thought I was, and she put in her earbuds, ending the conversation. The white cords hung against her neck as she turned away, sipping the coffee I had made while completely ignoring me. After 20 years of bedtime stories, bandaging scraped knees, and attending school plays, everything I had done had been reduced to nothing. I found Linda in the kitchen, preparing her weekly meal prep. Containers lined the counter in perfect rows, a testament to her need to control and organize every aspect of our home life. I asked her if we could talk privately, and she told me she was listening as she continued to chop vegetables. The knife hit the cutting board in a rhythmic motion. She didn't even stop her routine to have this conversation about last night. I tried to talk to her about what Jessica had said and how everyone had laughed, but she just told me that I was being too sensitive and that Jessica was young and didn't understand how her words could hurt people. I told her that Jessica was 20 years old and knew exactly what she was saying. Linda finally looked at me, but her expression was one of impatience, not sympathy. She told me not to be so dramatic and that we appreciated all I did for the family. When I said that what she was appreciating was what I did and not who I was, she told me I was the same person and went back to chopping, dismissing my concerns with her usual efficiency. She said that I provided stability and security and that it was important. I then asked her if I was just an ATM to her. The knife stopped moving, and Linda sighed heavily with exasperation. She said I was being ridiculous and that of course I was more than that, but that my contribution did matter. She then asked if I would prefer that they didn't need me at all. Her question hung in the air, mixing with the scent of bell peppers and onions. I realized that she genuinely didn't understand why I was so upset. In her mind, being valued for my financial contributions was enough, and being needed for practical purposes should be satisfying to me. I thought to myself that maybe I would prefer that they didn't need me. She asked me what I meant by that, but I was already walking through the kitchen, past the dining room where we had celebrated my birthday only 12 hours earlier, and into the garage where I could be alone to think. The garage was a place of refuge for me. My tools hung in perfect rows on the walls, and my car was clean and well-maintained. Everything had its designated place. It was the only space in the house that truly belonged to me, where my existence wasn't questioned or measured by my financial output. I opened the filing cabinet where I kept all of our important documents, including bank statements, insurance policies, and mortgage papers. All the evidence of my usefulness to the family from the past 37 years of earning, saving, and providing for them was neatly contained in manila folders. As I spread the papers across my workbench, my hands were surprisingly steady. The papers detailed all of our monthly expenses, automatic payments, and credit card bills that Linda and Jessica had generated without a second thought. My family's obligations totaled $4,800 a month, not including the mortgage. I began to wonder how long they could last without me. The question came to me with a kind of mathematical precision. How quickly would their casual dismissal of me turn to panic when the money stopped flowing? As I sat in my chair, surrounded by all the evidence of my family's complete dependence on my hard work, I felt a fundamental shift within me. My hurt was beginning to harden into something more purposeful. They wanted to reduce me to a function. I thought to myself, fine, let's see how they manage when that function stops working. At around 11:30 that night, I carried the financial documents from the garage to my home office. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the heating system and the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I could hear Linda's steady and deep breathing coming from our bedroom. Jessica was likely asleep with her earbuds still in, listening to music to forget our conversation from earlier that day. I turned on the desk lamp, creating a small circle of warm light in the otherwise dark room. The papers were spread out across my desk, a clear map of my family's complete dependence on my income. Bank statements, credit card bills, and payments for utilities and insurance all came from accounts that I controlled. The math was simple and brutal. The mortgage was $2,100 a month. Utilities were $350. Car payments for both vehicles were $850. Insurance was $400. The credit cards that Linda and Jessica used freely averaged about $900. Groceries, gas, and other miscellaneous expenses added up to another $800. Our total monthly burn rate was $5,400, but my after-tax salary was only $4,800. We were operating at a deficit that I had to cover with careful planning and by occasionally working overtime. They had no idea how close we actually lived to the edge or how much I had sacrificed to maintain their comfortable illusion of financial security. I pulled some photo albums from the desk drawer and began flipping through them, looking at pictures from better times. There was a picture of Jessica when she was 5, sitting on my shoulders at the zoo, her face filled with wonder. I looked at pictures from family vacations where she still wanted to hold my hand and called me Daddy instead of Dad, with that tone of bored obligation. Looking at her 7-year-old face in a Christmas morning photo, I whispered to myself, "When did you stop loving me, Jessica?" The computer screen flickered to life when I moved the mouse. I typed "how to disappear without a trace" into the search bar and was surprised by the number of results. I read articles about people who had left their old lives behind and started fresh somewhere else, leaving families that had taken them for granted. While most of the articles were revenge fantasies, some of them offered practical advice on how to disappear in modern America where everything was tracked and documented. The suggestions included opening new bank accounts in different states and establishing residency somewhere else. I opened a notebook and began to write. First, I needed to find out how long they could survive without me. Second, I needed to establish my own resources. Third, I needed to carefully plan my absence. I wanted to be gone long enough to teach them my value, but not so long that they would suffer permanently. This wasn't about destroying them, but about making them understand who I was beyond my bank account. The pen moved steadily across the paper. I wrote down transfer funds to a new bank account, research apartments in other cities, and arrange temporary leave from work. I had 6 weeks of accumulated vacation time, and I wanted to let them wonder where their ATM had gone. My coffee had grown cold hours ago, but I hadn't even noticed. For the first time in years, I felt focused and purposeful, not just reacting to their demands and dismissals, but actively planning something that would change the dynamic of our family forever. I researched bank routing numbers, apartment listing websites, and storage unit rental facilities. I worked methodically, using my engineering mind to create detailed plans for various scenarios. I considered what I would say if Jessica tried to contact me, or if Linda called the police. I thought about how I would handle questions about my mental state. They thought I was predictable and boring, just a reliable source of money and stability. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The first light of dawn was beginning to creep through the windows of my office when I heard Linda's alarm clock ring upstairs. I quickly gathered all the papers and notebooks, filing everything back into the cabinet. When she came downstairs in 20 minutes, I needed to appear normal, just another ordinary morning in our suburban routine. But for me, everything had changed. As I climbed the stairs to shower and get dressed for what might be my last normal day at work for a while, I felt a sense of anticipation I hadn't experienced in years. They wanted to know what life was like without me, and they were about to find out. The next morning, I drove downtown to the First National Bank, an institution I had never used before. My footsteps echoed on the marble floors as I approached the new accounts desk. My driver's license showed my real name, but my intentions were anything but honest. A young, eager banker greeted me and asked what had brought me in. She had no idea she was helping me disappear. I leaned forward slightly, giving the impression of a cautious middle-aged man making a smart financial choice. I told her I wanted to open a separate savings account for some personal projects. The banker asked me what my plans for the account were, and I told her that I wanted more privacy in my finances and that I wanted to keep some money separate from our household budget. She nodded enthusiastically, probably thinking I was going to surprise Linda with something expensive. She had no idea. Within 30 minutes, I had transferred $8,000 from an old savings account that Linda had forgotten about. Stepping into the convenience store on 8 Mile felt like entering a different world. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I used cash to purchase 3 prepaid debit cards, each loaded with $500. The clerk barely looked up from her phone as she asked me if I was planning any big purchases. I told her I just like to keep my options open. On Wednesday, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and drove to Lansing. The 90-mile drive took me from the urban sprawl of Detroit to Michigan's smaller cities and rural areas. I stayed on the back roads to avoid the highways with their surveillance cameras and electronic toll systems. Lansing felt smaller and quieter than Detroit. The rental market was cheaper and had places that didn't require long-term commitments or background checks. I found a studio apartment in a converted house near downtown, the kind of place that attracted temporary residents and people who preferred to pay with cash. The weathered landlord, a man in his 60s, looked at the bills I handed him and said that most people paid with cards these days. When he asked me if the money was legitimate, I told him I was old-fashioned and didn't trust banks much. He shrugged and took the cash for the first and last month's rent and the security deposit. He asked me if I wanted a receipt, and I told him it wasn't necessary. The apartment was simple, with a Murphy bed, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom with a cracked mirror. It was perfect for someone who wanted to disappear without a trace. I had paid for 3 months of rent up front using the alias Harold Wilson. It was close enough to my real name, John Harold, to remember, but different enough to create distance. On Thursday, I went on another shopping trip, this time to a drugstore where I bought hair dye, some reading glasses with a minimal prescription, and some clothes from the bargain rack. The cashier, a teenager with purple-streaked hair, barely looked at my purchases. As she scanned the hair color box, she asked if I was going for a new look. I simply told her that it was time for a change after all these years. That evening, I stood in my bathroom, applying dark brown dye to my graying hair. The chemical smell filled the small room as I watched decades of gray hair disappear down the drain. Looking at my reflection, a stranger stared back at me. It was someone who looked younger and more serious, with darker hair and cheap glasses that changed the shape of my face. Linda knocked on the door and asked me what the smell was. I told her I was just fixing a clogged drain and would be out in a minute. The next morning on my way to work, I carefully cleaned everything up and disposed of the evidence in a gas station dumpster. My coworkers noticed my hair and joked that I was going through a midlife crisis and that I'd be buying a sports car and dating a younger woman next. If only they knew what I was really planning. The weekend gave me time to make my final preparations. I gathered my birth certificate, passport, social security card, and banking information from our home office filing system. Everything fit into a small briefcase that I could carry without suspicion. On Sunday night, I sat in my car outside our house, looking at the warm yellow light coming from the kitchen windows. I could see Linda cleaning dishes while Jessica sat at the table, probably scrolling through social media. This was the image of domestic peace that I had worked so hard to maintain for 37 years. Everything was about to change. They would soon find out what life was like without their reliable ATM, their taken-for-granted provider. The thought of them finding out should have brought me a great deal of satisfaction, but instead, I felt a tightness in my chest. I couldn't help but wonder if I was really ready to shatter this carefully constructed life to teach them a lesson that might permanently change our relationships. I turned off the engine and walked toward the house. My transformation was complete, but my resolve was still hardening. At 5 a.m., I stood in our bedroom doorway, watching Linda sleep. Her breathing was deep and peaceful as one of her arms was draped over the space where I usually lay. After 32 years of marriage, she had no idea this might be our last morning together for months. Jessica's door was closed, and I could hear soft music coming from whatever she had fallen asleep listening to. All of my memories of 20 years of bedtime stories, scraped knees, and father-daughter moments were about to be put to the test by my absence. I had already packed everything into 2 small duffel bags, including clothes, documents, toiletries, and the burner phone I had activated yesterday. It was amazing how little a person actually needed when all of the non-essentials were removed. The briefcase with the financial documents was by the front door, ready for my new life. The note I had written the night before lay on my desk. It had only 3 sentences that would explain everything and nothing at all. It said, "I'm gone to find myself. I don't know when I'll return. Jay." I placed it on the kitchen table where Linda would see it when she came down to make coffee. This was the same spot where we had eaten thousands of meals, where Jessica had done her homework, and where our family had gathered for countless ordinary moments that I had apparently taken for granted. I placed my phone next to the note. This device had connected me to work, emails, family schedules, and the constant demands of being everyone's solution to every problem. Leaving it felt like severing an umbilical cord. The burner phone felt strange in my pocket. It was a cheap plastic rectangle with a number nobody knew, representing freedom and isolation wrapped in a $10 package from the convenience store. I carried my bags to the garage, loaded them into my car, and started the engine as quietly as I could. The automatic door opener seemed impossibly loud in the pre-dawn silence, but no lights came on in any of the windows. My family slept on, oblivious to the earthquake about to hit their comfortable suburban lives. The streets were empty except for early shift workers and delivery trucks. I drove south on Middle Belt Road, purposely avoiding the highways and their electronic surveillance systems. I took back roads through neighborhoods I had lived near for decades, but had never really explored. Each mile I drove added more distance between me and the life I was leaving behind. I was in Ingham County when the sun came up, painting the rural landscape in soft gold and pink. Fields stretched out from the road, dotted with farmhouses where other families were likely starting their days. These were normal families who seemed to appreciate each other, where fathers weren't just seen as walking bank accounts. The Lansing apartment felt different in the daylight, smaller and more sterile, like a hotel room where someone might stay while in between lives, which was exactly what I supposed it was. I began to methodically unpack, hanging clothes in the narrow closet and arranging my toiletries on the bathroom shelf. I set up my laptop on the small table that would serve as both a desk and a dining table, creating the infrastructure for a life lived in hiding. It only took me 20 minutes to create fake social media accounts for Harold Wilson. The generic Facebook and Instagram profiles had pictures downloaded from stock image websites, looking real enough for a casual inspection. Most importantly, they would allow me to keep an eye on my family's online activity without them knowing. By noon, I was settled into my new temporary existence, surrounded by sparse furniture and cheap appliances, and looking out at a parking lot instead of our carefully maintained backyard. I had given up everything for this experiment in teaching ungrateful people what they had lost. I opened my laptop and logged into Harold Wilson's Facebook account. From here, I could watch my family's digital lives unfold, observe their reactions to my disappearance, and see how long it would take them to move from being annoyed to being genuinely concerned. The waiting had begun. In a few hours, Linda would find my note. Sometime this evening, they would realize I wasn't coming home from work. Tomorrow, the first bills would arrive without anyone there to pay them. My burner phone was silent on the table. Nobody had this number. Nobody could reach me unless I chose to reach out. For the first time in decades, I was completely unreachable and utterly free from the demands and expectations that had previously defined my existence. The silence felt both liberating and terrifying. I spent the first day monitoring my family's digital footprints from my sparse apartment, just waiting for someone to discover my absence. The fake Harold Wilson accounts gave me access to their social media worlds without them knowing their disappeared father was watching every post, every comment, and every casual dismissal of his existence. I knew Linda had found the note on Tuesday evening because her Facebook status appeared at 8:47 p.m. She had written something like, "Does anyone know where John might be? He left a strange note and didn't come home from work. I'm starting to worry." Within minutes, comments from her friends rolled in, most offering support and theories. But it was the tone that really struck me. No one seemed to be genuinely concerned. They were more curious than worried. Barbara from her book club wrote that men and their midlife crises were so dramatic, and Nancy from down the street added that I would be back as soon as I got hungry. Mary, my sister-in-law, whose laughter had echoed through our dining room just days before, suggested that maybe I had finally decided to do something spontaneous for once. On Wednesday, Jessica made her first Instagram post about the situation. She had taken a selfie in our kitchen, making an exaggerated, worried face that was clearly for show. She wrote that her dad had decided to have a midlife crisis and had gone off to find himself, adding that men were so dramatic when they didn't get enough attention and that he should have just bought a sports car and gotten over it. The post received 43 likes and 15 comments, mostly from her college friends, who were making jokes about dad behavior and boomer drama. My own disappearance had become content for her social media. Mary commented that boys were always so dramatic, and that I'd come crawling back when reality hit. By Thursday, Linda's posts were more frequent, but no more urgent. She had called my office and found out I had taken sick leave. She was now reaching out to my few friends and coworkers. Her updates read like someone dealing with a minor inconvenience rather than a missing spouse. She wrote that there was still no word from me and that it was very unlike me to take time off work without telling anyone, but that she was sure I was fine. She added that men just needed their space sometimes. On that same day, the automatic payments for our bills began to fail. Our electric bill, which was usually withdrawn electronically on the 28th, bounced due to insufficient funds. I had transferred most of our checking account balance to my new account, leaving just enough to cover a few days of normal expenses. Linda posted about it on Friday morning. She was having some banking issues and asked if anyone knew why the automatic payments might not be working. She wrote that technology was so confusing sometimes. The comments she received were helpful but clueless. Friends suggested she call the bank, check her account balance, or contact customer service. Nobody was connecting her husband's disappearance to their sudden financial difficulties. I found myself refreshing their profiles obsessively, watching my family's reactions to my absence unfold in real time. Their responses were exactly what I had predicted. They were dismissive and joked about it, treating my disappearance as an inconvenience rather than a crisis. But something unexpected was also happening. I watched Jessica's posts become slightly more desperate. Fewer selfies and more questions about whether anyone had seen her dad. I felt a twist of something that might have been guilt. On Friday night, she posted a photo of our family from last Christmas. We were all smiling around the Christmas tree that I had driven 40 miles to find because she had mentioned she wanted a really tall one. The caption was different from her usual tone. It said she was starting to actually worry about her dad and that it had been 4 days and this wasn't like him. She added that if anyone had heard from me, to please let her know. She wrote that she knew she gave me a hard time, but that she just wanted to know I was safe. Sitting in my stripped-down apartment and reading my daughter's first genuine expression of concern, I felt the satisfaction of my plan being validated, mixed with an uncomfortable realization that I might be hurting the people I was trying to teach a lesson. The lesson was working, and they were starting to understand what they had lost. But was I prepared for what that understanding might cost all of us? 2 weeks after my disappearance, I sat in Murphy's Cafe on Elmwood Street, watching through the window as a Detroit Edison truck pulled up to my former home. The coffee had gone cold in my hands, but I couldn't look away from what I had orchestrated. The utility worker, a middle-aged man in a hard hat, walked directly to our electrical meter. He was a professional, showing no hesitation or sympathy for the suburban family that was about to lose power. It was just a routine disconnection of services due to non-payment. I watched Linda rush outside in her bathrobe, still holding her morning coffee. Even from across the street, I could see her gesturing frantically, likely explaining that it was all a misunderstanding and that her husband always handled the bills. The utility worker just shrugged and continued with his task. He told her she was 47 days past due and that he was just following company orders. The click of the disconnect was audible even from my surveillance post. Suddenly, our house went dark. There was no more humming refrigerator, no blinking digital clocks, and no power for Jessica's endless phone charging and social media scrolling. Inside the cafe, I ordered another coffee to maintain my cover. The barista, a college-age girl with green hair, smiled pleasantly. She had no idea she was serving coffee to a man who was watching his own family's world collapse in real time. My burner phone buzzed with a news alert from the fake Facebook account I had created. Linda had posted frantically, asking if anyone knew how to get emergency power restoration since the electric company had made a mistake. The comments she received were less supportive than before. Friends offered sympathy, but no solutions. Greg commented, asking if she couldn't just pay the bill, and Mary added, asking if she had tried calling my work. By afternoon, I watched Jessica come out of the house. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled. There was no hair straightener, no makeup mirror lighting, and no Instagram-ready selfie setup. She walked to our neighbor's house, probably to ask if she could charge her phone. From the neighbor's window, I could see that the conversation wasn't going well. Mrs. Patterson was polite but brief. Nobody wanted to get involved in our family's financial drama. That evening, Linda's car pulled into the driveway with Greg and Mary. I knew this was coming. It was a family meeting to discuss the crisis. From my observation post, I watched them gather around our dining room table, the same table where they had laughed at my expense just weeks ago. The conversation was heated, with lots of gesturing and raised voices. Eventually, Greg and Mary left, their body language suggesting they had refused to help. It wasn't surprising. When the money stopped flowing, the fair-weather relatives disappeared. That night, Linda posted again, asking if anyone knew of any emergency financial assistance programs for a temporary hardship situation. The responses were revealing. Fewer friends were engaging, and more were suggesting that she call my family or contact social services. The middle-class social circle was clearly uncomfortable with actual poverty knocking at their door. Jessica's Instagram had also changed. The dismissive jokes about her dramatic dad were gone. Her latest post showed their dark house with a simple caption, "Anyone hiring? Need a job ASAP." For the first time, she was facing real consequences. No power meant no laptop for online classes, no hairstyling tools, and no way to maintain the lifestyle she had taken for granted. The comments were a mix of sympathy from friends and a few actual job suggestions. I spent 3 more days watching the house from various locations around the neighborhood, the cafe, the park across the street, and even the library parking lot. Each day brought new evidence of their struggles. On day 4, I watched Jessica walk to 3 different businesses, probably filling out job applications. Her usual confident stride had been replaced by a nervous, purposeful movement. On day 5, Linda carried bags out to her car, probably clothes and household items to sell. The woman who had laughed at her provider husband was now liquidating possessions to buy groceries. On day 6, cable and internet trucks arrived to disconnect more services, more isolation from their social networks and entertainment. On the 7th day, sitting in Murphy's cafe and watching my daughter walk back from what looked like a job interview, I felt something unexpected. She looked smaller somehow, less entitled, and more aware of the world beyond her phone screen. I began to wonder if this was enough. Had they learned what I had intended to teach them? On April 20th, I watched Detective Johnson's unmarked car pull into our driveway from behind the newspaper rack at Patterson's convenience store. Linda had finally involved the police, a step I had expected weeks ago. Through the store's window, I watched the detective, a heavy-set black woman in her 40s, spend nearly an hour inside our house. She took notes, examined my abandoned phone, and probably asked all the standard questions about my mental state and recent behavior. When she came out, Linda followed her to the front porch, gesturing desperately. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Linda's body language was screaming with frustration. I could hear the detective telling her that her husband isn't a missing person in the criminal sense because he was an adult who had left voluntarily, and that they had the note to prove it. Linda's voice cracked with genuine distress as she insisted that this wasn't like me and that I wouldn't just abandon my responsibilities. The detective told her that thousands of people disappear every year due to financial stress, family problems, or a midlife crisis, and that without any evidence of foul play or mental incapacity, there was little they could do. I adjusted my position behind the newspaper rack, making sure my fake mustache and different glasses were still in place. My disguise had been working perfectly for 3 weeks. None of our neighbors recognized Harold Wilson, the quiet man who occasionally browsed magazines at Patterson's. After the detective left, I walked to the public library to check social media updates on the communal computers. Jessica's Instagram showed a photo of her in a coffee shop uniform. The caption said, "Day 3 at Grind Coffee. Learning that work is actually hard. Who knew?" The comments were a mix of encouragement and surprise from friends who had never seen her hold a job. Some classmates made jokes about her slumming it, but others offered genuine support. She was beginning to learn who her real friends were. Linda's Facebook posts had become increasingly desperate. She wrote that the bank was threatening foreclosure if we didn't catch up on our mortgage payments, and asked if anyone knew about any loan modification programs. The bank letter had arrived that morning. I had watched the mail carrier deliver it, then watched Linda's face lose all its color as she read the contents. 90 days of missed payments would trigger formal foreclosure proceedings. That afternoon, I followed Linda to 3 different pawn shops on 8 Mile. From my car, I watched her emerge from each one with smaller amounts of cash. She was selling jewelry and electronics that represented decades of gifts and purchases. At Golden Eagle Pawn, I got close enough to overhear her conversation with the owner. The owner told her the best he could do for the earrings was $50, even though she insisted they were worth $300 when I bought them. He told her that might be the retail value, but that he had to resell them and that she could take it or leave it. She took it. The woman who had mocked my role as the family provider was now converting wedding gifts into grocery money. That evening, Jessica's shift at Grind Coffee overlapped with my own coffee purchase. I sat in the back corner, with my fake mustache and glasses in place, watching my daughter work her first real job. She moved carefully, still learning the routines of the coffee machine and taking every customer interaction seriously. When a businessman snapped at her for his foam being too thick, she professionally apologized instead of getting defensive. She told him she was sorry and would remake it for him. The customer softened at her genuine politeness. He told her thanks and that he appreciated it. This was a different Jessica than the entitled 20-year-old who had dismissed her father as an ATM. Work was teaching her lessons about human interaction that college and suburban comfort never had. But watching her struggle with the espresso machine and seeing her tired expression after an 8-hour shift, I felt an unexpected tightness in my chest. She was learning and growing and becoming more thoughtful, maybe too quickly. Linda's latest Facebook post appeared as I checked social media before leaving the library. She wrote, "John, if you're reading this somehow, please come home. We understand now. We're sorry." The desperate sincerity in Linda's words was so different from the casual dismissal of 4 weeks ago. There were no jokes from friends, no lighthearted comments about dramatic husbands, just genuine support from people who could see our family was truly struggling. As I drove back to my Lansing apartment, I kept thinking about Jessica's exhausted face after her coffee shop shift. The lesson was working, maybe too well. Had I pushed them far enough, or was it time to escalate once more? May 20th dawned clear and cold in Lansing. I had spent the previous night assembling the most damaging financial documents from our 32 years of marriage. Bank statements showing Jessica's credit card spending, Linda's shopping expenses, and a detailed breakdown of their monthly consumption versus my income. The public library opened at 9 a.m. I arrived early, positioning myself at a computer terminal in a back corner where security cameras couldn't capture my screen. The printer hummed quietly as I reproduced evidence of their financial dependency. Jessica's credit card statements from the last year showed a monthly average of $1,400 on clothes, cosmetics, and entertainment. Linda's spending patterns showed $800 monthly on household expenses, which included salon visits and lunch dates with friends. Together, they had been consuming 90% of my take-home pay. The anonymous letter took 3 drafts to perfect. My final version read, "Perhaps now you'll understand what real human value means. For 37 years, one person carried this family financially while being treated as invisible. The attached documents show exactly how much your ATM provided. Maybe you'll appreciate actual work versus taking everything for granted." There was no signature, no return address, and nothing that could trace back to Harold Wilson or me. At the post office, I paid cash for overnight delivery to our house. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, processed the package without interest. I told her it was an anonymous gift for a friend, and she shrugged and stamped the shipping label. By tomorrow morning, my family would receive 30 pages of financial reality they had never bothered to understand. Back in my apartment, I monitored social media through my fake accounts. Jessica was posting from her coffee shop shift, noting that she was getting better at latte art and that small victories mattered. The change in her tone was remarkable. There were no entitled complaints, no mocking comments about her situation. She was genuinely trying to build something through her own effort. Tuesday morning brought immediate results. Linda's Facebook status appeared at 8:23 a.m. Someone sent us anonymous documents about our finances. Whoever did this, it's cruel to kick people when they're already down. The comments were sympathetic, but fewer than before. Friends were getting tired of our ongoing financial drama, especially with anonymous elements adding mystery and discomfort. Jessica's Instagram post came 2 hours later. It was a photo of the financial documents spread across our kitchen table. Her caption was different from anything she had posted since my disappearance. It said that someone had sent them proof of how much their dad had actually sacrificed for their family and that the numbers were devastating. She ended with a direct plea. "Dad, if this is you, if you can see this somehow, please come back. I understand now what we put you through. I'm sorry." The post received over 200 likes and dozens of comments. Friends who had been joking about dramatic fathers were now offering genuine support and apologies for their previous dismissiveness. The real impact came from an unexpected source. One of Jessica's college friends shared the post, adding her own comment. "This is heartbreaking. How did nobody in this family know they were spending this much?" The viral sharing began slowly, then accelerated. Local Detroit social media groups picked up the story of the missing father and the financial reality his family never understood. Strangers were commenting about their own family financial dynamics and about taking providers for granted. By Wednesday evening, a local news station had contacted Linda about doing a human interest story on families who don't discuss finances. She declined, but the attention was making our situation public in ways I hadn't anticipated. Jessica's response to the media attention surprised me. She posted that their family's privacy mattered more than getting sympathy and that her dad deserved better than having their business discussed by strangers. She was protecting our family name and taking responsibility for their situation instead of seeking external validation or pity. The growth was real, but so was the pain I was causing. Thursday night, I sat in my sparse apartment staring at Jessica's latest post. It was a simple photo of our family from last Christmas. Her caption read, "I miss my dad. Not because we need money, but because I need my father. I was wrong about everything. If you're out there, Dad, please forgive me." The comments were filled with friends offering support, sharing their own stories about appreciating parents, and expressing hope that our family would reunite. For the first time since leaving, I felt genuine doubt about my plan. They understood now. They were changed, learning, and growing into better people. Jessica was working, Linda was managing finances independently. Both were experiencing real consequences. Was continuing to punish them at this point revenge or just cruelty? 3 days after sending the anonymous documents, I found myself staring at Jessica's tearful Instagram video for the 20th time. Her words kept echoing in my sparse Lansing apartment. "Dad, if this is you, if you can see this somehow, please come back. I understand now what we put you through." The satisfaction I had expected from her suffering wasn't there. Instead, I felt something uncomfortable twisting in my chest, something that might have been guilt. I opened my laptop and searched for Therapist Lansing, Michigan. If I was going to continue this psychological warfare, I needed to understand what was happening to me. Why did watching my daughter's genuine pain feel worse than enduring her casual cruelty? Dr. Thaddeus Klein's office was located in a professional building downtown. The neutral beige walls and comfortable furniture were designed to encourage confession. I had booked the appointment under my Harold Wilson alias, claiming family relationship issues as my primary concern. "What brings you here today, Harold?" Dr. Klein was a soft-spoken man in his 50s with a gray beard and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His voice carried the practiced calm of someone who had heard every possible human crisis. I chose my words carefully, mixing truth with fiction. "I'm having trouble with my family. We had a conflict, and now I'm watching them struggle with the consequences of their actions." "Tell me about this conflict." "For years, they treated me like I was only valuable for what I could provide financially. They made it clear that my worth was measured in dollars, not as a person. So, I removed myself from the situation. I let them experience life without their provider." Dr. Klein leaned forward slightly. "And how do you feel watching them struggle?" The question caught me off guard. "Satisfied mostly. They're finally learning what real work means, what actual consequences look like." "Mostly satisfied," he repeated. I hesitated. "Sometimes I watch my daughter at her job. She works at a coffee shop now, and she looks exhausted and defeated, and I feel." "What do you feel, Harold?" "Pain, which doesn't make sense. This is what I wanted." Over the following 2 weeks, I attended 3 more sessions with Dr. Klein. Each appointment chipped away at the cold satisfaction I had built around my heart like armor. "Revenge rarely brings the satisfaction we hope for," he said during our 4th meeting. "Usually it just creates new pain for everyone involved. They used you for 37 years, and now you're using their dependency on you. Is that equal justice? Or are you becoming what you resented in them?" The question followed me back to my apartment, where I continued to monitor my family's digital footprints. Jessica's posts had evolved from desperate pleas to quiet determination. There were photos of her learning latte art, small victories at work, and genuine gratitude for customers who treated her kindly. Linda had started posting about job interviews, her first employment applications in 20 years. The woman who had dismissed my concerns about being appreciated was now experiencing what it meant to be evaluated based on worth rather than taken for granted. But they were also losing everything. The house was officially in foreclosure proceedings. They had moved into a one-bedroom apartment on 8 Mile, sharing a space that was smaller than our old garage. What would forgiveness look like for you? Dr. Klein asked in our 5th session. I don't know if I'm ready for forgiveness. I'm not asking if you're ready. I'm asking what it would look like if you were. That night, I drove to Detroit and parked outside their new apartment building. Through a ground-floor window, I could see Jessica studying at a small table, probably doing homework between work shifts. Linda was washing dishes in a kitchenette that was barely larger than a closet. They looked tired but not defeated, changed but not broken. They were adapting, learning, and growing into people who understood the value of effort and sacrifice. Maybe they had learned enough. Maybe it was time to consider whether my lesson had achieved its purpose, or if I was just prolonging their suffering for the sake of being right. June 15th arrived with an email notification on my phone that changed everything. Jessica had posted a video to her Instagram account at 2:47 a.m., which was never a good sign for emotional content. I opened the link while sitting in my morning coffee shop in Lansing, the same place where I had monitored my family's crisis for months. But this video was different from her previous posts. She had recorded herself in their tiny apartment bathroom, the only private space available. Her face was swollen from crying, her hair pulled back messily, and she was wearing the coffee shop uniform she had probably just gotten home from working a double shift. Dad, wherever you are, I need you to see this. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. I know you might never forgive me for what I said at your birthday. I called you an ATM, and everyone laughed, and I thought it was funny. She paused, wiping her nose with a tissue. But you were never just an ATM. You were my hero when I was little. You taught me to ride my bike. You came to every school play. You stayed up helping me with math homework, even when you had early meetings. And I threw all of that away for a stupid joke. I found myself leaning closer to the phone screen, watching my daughter break down in a public cafe while other customers chatted about their normal problems. Someone sent us documents showing exactly how much money you spent on our family over the years. 37 years of sacrificing everything for us. And Mom and I just took it all. We expected it. We acted like you owed us comfort and stability without ever saying thank you. Her voice grew stronger, more determined. I have a job now, Dad. It's hard work, and customers can be mean, and my feet hurt after 8-hour shifts. But I understand now what you did for us every single day. I understand that work isn't just about paychecks. It's about dignity and purpose and taking care of people you love. She looked directly into the camera, and I could see the change in her eyes. This wasn't manipulation or performance. This was genuine remorse. If you can hear this, if you're reading our posts somehow, please come home. Not because we need money. I can work. Mom's getting interviews. We'll figure out the financial stuff, but because I need my dad. I need to tell you I'm sorry and that I love you and that you were never, ever just a provider to me. The video ended with her saying, I miss you, Daddy, using the name she hadn't called me since she was 12. I watched it 17 more times before noon. By evening, the video had been shared hundreds of times. Comments poured in from friends, strangers, and people sharing their own stories about taking family for granted. The local Detroit news had picked it up as a human interest story about family relationships and financial communication. But what broke my resolve completely was Linda's comment beneath the video. John, if you're reading this somehow, please come back. We understand now that we need you, not your credit card. We need the man who built this family with love, not money. That night, I sat in my car at the Detroit city limits, engine running, the video playing on repeat on my phone. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. For 3 months, I had put them through genuine hardship to teach them a lesson about appreciation and respect. They had lost their house, their comfortable lifestyle, and their illusions about money appearing magically, but they had also gained something. Jessica had a work ethic and empathy. Linda had independence and self-reliance. They had learned to value effort over entitlement. The question was, had they suffered enough? Or was I just a man who had become addicted to controlling others through their pain? 2 weeks later, I walked into Grind Coffee, the same cafe where I had conducted surveillance on my family months ago. But today, I wasn't hiding behind newspapers or pretending to read magazines. Today, I was ready to end this. The cafe had changed ownership and been renamed Grind Coffee. It had new management, updated decor, and a familiar face behind the counter. Jessica stood at the espresso machine with her back to me, her brown hair pulled into a neat ponytail beneath a red visor. She had lost weight from the physical work, but her movements were confident and practiced. 3 months of employment had transformed her posture from that of an entitled teenager to that of a competent adult. I took a seat at a small table near the counter, my fake mustache and glasses still in place. She hadn't noticed me yet, focused on crafting what looked like an elaborate latte design. "Can I get you anything?" she asked, approaching my table with a coffee pot and a professional smile. Her voice was different, warmer and more attentive to customers than she had ever been to family members. Work had taught her things about treating people with respect that 20 years of suburban comfort never had. "Coffee would be great." I kept my voice slightly lower than normal, not ready for recognition yet. She poured carefully, avoiding spills with the precision of someone who had learned that mistakes cost money. "Cream or sugar?" "Black is fine." I studied her face, looking for traces of the spoiled girl who had laughed at her father's birthday. She was still there, but she had been tempered by experience and humility. "Can I get you more coffee?" she asked, returning after 10 minutes. "Sure, Jess." The word hung in the air between us. She froze, the coffee pot tilted mid-pour, her eyes snapping to my face with sudden intensity. "Dad," her voice was barely a whisper. Is that really you?" I pulled off the fake glasses, meeting her stare directly. "Hello, sweetheart." The coffee pot trembled in her hands before she set it down carefully on my table. Her face cycled through shock, disbelief, anger, and overwhelming relief in the span of seconds. 3 months, her voice cracked. "I thought I'd lost you forever. And I spent 20 years thinking I'd already lost you." She slumped into the chair across from me, tears starting immediately. "I'm so sorry. We treated you terribly, and you just disappeared." "I never went far. I just wanted you to understand what you had before it was gone. I was watching you this whole time from a distance. I needed to see if the lessons would stick or if you'd just wait for me to fix everything again." Other customers were starting to stare at our emotional reunion, but Jessica didn't seem to notice. Her manager, a kind-looking older woman, approached our table. "Jess, take your break. Family comes first." For the next hour, we talked. I explained the apartment in Lansing, the surveillance, and the anonymous documents. She told me about learning to work, about understanding the value of effort, and about missing her father rather than her family's income source. "We all made mistakes," I said finally. "The question is, what do we do now?" "Come home," she said, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "Not to fix our problems. We're learning to handle those ourselves. But because we love you, because you're my dad, not my ATM." I looked at this young woman who had grown up in 3 months, who had learned empathy through struggle and appreciation through loss. She wasn't the same person who had laughed at my birthday party. Neither was I. There will need to be changes. Family therapy, real conversations about money and respect, and what we expect from each other. "Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes," she said, squeezing my hand. "Then let's go home and figure this out together." We walked out of the cafe together, two people who had both learned difficult lessons about love, sacrifice, and the difference between being needed and being valued. The family that emerged from this crisis would be stronger than the one that had fallen apart. Not because the problems were solved, but because everyone finally understood their part in creating and fixing them.